Hi, everybody. Sam McMasters is here. However, she is tending to little ones. So Sam, I will trust that you will jump on if you want to, if you're able.
But thank you. I'm going to leave my camera off just because I have two toddlers running around. So I apologize for that. So we have, for tonight, we're going to talk about transitions. We're going to focus a lot on transitions building to building, but we'll also talk about grade level to grade level transitions, or when a student transitions from one intervention specialist to the next. We'll share with you some procedures that we've put in place in the last year to smooth that transition and to make it successful for all students. And some of you who have been through this process before maybe noticed some changes last spring that we did. We've already started this spring planning for transitions for next year. So I'm really excited. We have Stephanie Langley, who's our department chair, and I did hear you introduce her before, but she particularly works with fifth grade mostly, so has been heavily involved in the transition from elementary to middle school at Cassingham. The process is the same for all three buildings, but she'll be able to speak a little bit to just what those specific things are we put in place for groups of students, but also for individual students. And then Collette Young is an intervention specialist also at Cassingham Elementary, but Collette also brings with her several years of middle school experience. So transitioning students from the elementary to the middle school, and then as a receiving intervention specialist at the middle school, how those supports might look for a student. Brooke Shouse joins us from Montrose Elementary, and she will also be able to share a lot about what happens within the building and how we transition from one intervention specialist to the next. Jay Scott, unfortunately, was not able to be here tonight. He is out ill and was going to speak from the high school perspective, but I will try to jump back on and just share that information as well. I did put it in the slides so you could kind of see the process, but a little bit similar to the middle school, but then with some additional steps that the high school takes with that middle school to high school transition. Libby Costin joined us earlier in the year to talk about transition, post-secondary transition. And then one of the slides will just talk about all the different types of transitions. And we're going to focus on that middle slide, that grade to grade and building to building. We could spend a whole meeting on preschool to school age transition and another one on post-secondary. So we really want to focus on what your experience will be this year and give you an opportunity to ask questions about what to expect. So Cathy, I'll let you kind of take over from there.
Okay. So as Sam said, we have put a lot of more thorough processes in place. What we have done just for consistency across the buildings and the teams, this is an internal forum that we use. So we start thinking about this right after winter break. And this is just a tool for the school teams to go through. So we make sure that we're doing everything we need to be doing to help with the transition to the next building. So in January, we really just start basically reviewing which students are transitioning to the next building and planning those meetings. If we also plan on, if a student has an IEP that is an annual IEP that is due in August or September, we try to make sure that we get that in the spring. That way the familiar team can help write that IEP for the fall. In February, I meet with ISs. So over here on the right, we have students with more complex needs. Maybe they have more multiple related services, and there are a lot more things we want to make sure are in place. So I meet with those ISs in particular, just to make sure that we're thinking of everything that we need for that transition. In March, by the end of March, all ISs complete a transition dialogue form, which I'll share with you in a minute. And I'll go into more detail in that. And then we also start planning basically transition activities. So it's my experience has been that I know the fifth graders in the past have come to visit the middle school in general. I think with COVID last year, it was we approached it in a more unique way, but all fifth graders visit the middle school. And then we might take students with IEPs in smaller groups or even individually to go visit the middle school and the different classrooms and the settings. We really try to individualize the transition process just like everything else. So whatever the student might need for that successful transition, so they have the same things in place in the next building that they have in their current building. So that might involve, that might involve for the IS to go observe the student in the sending school and see them in their classrooms where they are now. And then the student to go visit the classroom that they might be in the fall. In April, the middle school holds transition meetings where that is an opportunity for everybody to meet and talk that through. And I'll talk that through in a minute with the dialogue guide. In the spring, in May, we will continue to make sure that the environments will be ready for the fall. So any supports that need to be in place, any even spaces that we need to consider, staffing we need to consider, and then just as many visits that need to be in place. And the Jason Cottle at the middle school is always open to having parents come visit as often as they need to meet with everybody. Let me try to get back to the slideshow here. So the dialogue guide was created just for that. It's an internal tool to help with the dialogue during the transition meetings or any other time. So we're all used to sharing IEPs and going over IEPs and going over the important things. This is to help us have the conversation and make sure that we're remembering to share all the nuances and important things. So in the spring transition meetings, it's an opportunity for the elementary team and the parents to share as much as they can think of with the middle school team. And then vice versa. It's an opportunity for the middle school and the parents to ask questions and help get everything in place. So this tool just helps us think, oh, we need to remember to share that this student has this medical history, or they need this kind of support with transportation. These are the motivators. It's really just a tool to help us make sure we remember everything that we want to make sure we share. And I know Jason Cottle, the principal, has shared that he prints these out, he carries them around with him, he takes notes, with the end goal always being that the student will have what they need regardless what environment they're in. Whatever IEP supports and services they need, they'll have. And we want it to be as smooth as transition for them as possible.
So Cathy, I'll jump in there just real quick and say we do the same thing, middle school to high school. And our middle school and high school intervention specialists meet as a team. And then they also work through that dialogue guide. And I like to equate it to all of the things that we want to remember to tell people that aren't necessarily in the IEP. Like it could be things like, so-and-so is a really good support friend of theirs that are in the same class, or think about the requests that sometimes we make about what's a motivator right now, or maybe it's what are motivators that we've tried that haven't worked for students, or if they have a behavior plan in place. As much as we try to get all the details in writing, it's the rest of the conversation that we like to share with staff. We've also used these at our spring transition meetings with families so that families have an opportunity to add to those. Again, it's not something that we print off and put in every student's file. It's really meant to be a discussion guide, not another form or another piece of paper, but really to have them talk through things to help with that transition from the staff.
I want to give Stephanie and Brooke and Collette a chance to share here on their experience, some of the things that has helped them with this process.
I think it's been really helpful for families to have these transition meetings with Mr. Cottle in the spring. Obviously, I share all of my completed transition documents with him. And like Cathy says, he does print them out. He does take copious notes. He asks lots of really great questions. So when you as parents come to those meetings, please don't be afraid to share information, but also please don't be afraid to ask questions. In the past, well, last year was my first year to do it with him. It was just Mr. Cottle, myself, and then parents were in attendance. Usually at that point of the year, he really doesn't have any idea who he's going to assign as an IS to the students that are coming out of my classroom to the middle school. Each of the meetings we scheduled for 30 minutes apiece. So we really had to stick with that just because my day with those meetings was like one right after the other. So a little crazy. But he is willing to have, further conversations with parents. Absolutely. So he's really great about that. The transition piece, I think, we're all, including myself, a little worried about it. It's hard to think about kids moving literally across the hall from my classroom into that middle school. But I think it also makes it pretty easy because the kids have easy access to me. So I know that the kids that I had last year, the students I had last year that are in 6th grade this year do come and visit. So they know that they have that friendly face right there still in the elementary. And I made sure that the first couple of weeks that I was in the hallway for them and helping make sure they knew where they were getting to. So again, helping to make that transition a little more smooth. I do try to find some time that I can take, small groups so we can go walk around the building and they can start, getting a sense of where things are, because it's a little intimidating. I've gotten lost in the middle school quite a few times. So, I do try to help them get where they need to be as well.
Thanks, Stephanie. Brooke or Collette, can you share?
Sure. Oh, Brooke, do you want to go ahead?
No, you can go first.
Okay. Just to give another perspective, a lot of intervention specialists have had the opportunity to loop up. So we've taught a caseload of students in 3rd grade, and then we get to loop up with those same students in 4th grade. And when that happens, we all think, oh, this is so cool. We already know the kids. We don't have to go through that, 4 to 6 weeks of getting to know them and figure out how best to service their needs and their personalities and their interests. So what we love about the transition process in place now is it kind of helps us. So when we have new children on our caseload with a transition, we kind of feel like we know them. We get to figure out what their interests are, to start those conversations, their cultural backgrounds, things they're passionate about. And so just from a teaching perspective and getting to know the kids you work with, it's a big help.
Yeah, ditto that. Just to echo Collette, like I have the opportunity, I guess, well, most of my experience I would say is grade level to grade level, not so much 5th to the middle school, just a little bit with that. And then I was out actually at the end of last year when we did that. So, I think the forms were helpful for at least that perspective, like somebody else was able to take that over and work with another IS that typically leads that 5th to 6th grade transition. So I like that was in place to help with some of that. But from grade level to grade level, like Collette was saying, it is nice to loop with your classes. You do really get to know them and then be able to pass that on to the other people, because you forget just how well you know some of these kids when you've been with them for 3 years, 4 years sometimes. So we use the forms also, but also at least like speaking at Montrose, we talk together all the time. So it's a small enough group that we kind of purposely know everybody else's kids just to be, another face that they can talk to, communicate with, or help with anything. So we really try to get to know each other, everybody's kids. And hi, Bryn, I see that message. So I've lost track of what I was going to say. I don't know what I was saying. Sorry, I'm brain dead right now.
That's okay. Thanks, Brooke. Okay, and I did see there was a question in the chat. If the students join the transition meetings, absolutely, if it makes sense for them to be there, which a lot of times I think it would, It's really up to what's best that's going to help that meeting and help that with the transitioning. So if that might absolutely put their mind, help reduce some anxiety of the unknown, and add to those other things that we do to help them meet the teachers and see the new environments. Sam, I don't know if you wanted to discuss the middle school to high school.
I can do that. So middle school to high school transitions, very similar. We do schedule transition meetings for certain students, but not all of them. So fifth to sixth grade, we schedule transition meetings for all students. So you might say, like, why don't we do that for the high school? We do have individual counselor meetings. So intervention specialists work with the kids, who then work with their school counselor to do their scheduling meeting. And Andrea Brown, who's our high school department chair, a lot of times she will be the one to attend that transition or that counseling scheduling meeting with our students. So for example, last spring, she did all of our 8th to 9th grade scheduling meetings with the counselors to make sure that the kids were scheduled appropriately, that they were assigned to the intervention specialist we believe that they would have. And then those teams can make special arrangements for students. So if a student needs to come in the summer and meet their intervention specialist, or they need to come in a couple extra times to kind of walk through their schedule and talk about, in addition to what we do for all 9th graders for transition. But the process is a little more complicated just because of the scheduling of classes. But we do follow the same process where students who have multiple related services or have very, very complex needs, we give an opportunity for our ISs to go to the middle school to observe the students in the classroom before the end of the school year. We also give those students extra opportunities to visit the high school prior to the end of the school year. So for example, last year, I know there were multiple students who we set up a time for them to go spend some time at the high school with an intervention specialist to kind of see what it was like. It was almost like a shadowing experience. Not necessary for every student, but there were a few students that the IEP teams felt that it was needed. So I think that's very helpful. Andrea Brown, like I said, our department chair, works very closely with Kristen Robbins and Craig McMillan to make sure that not only our schedules met, but that they're familiar with the IEPs. I know a lot of times middle school, when you're in middle school, Mr. Cottle, and I've said this before, is one of those principals who not only reads every single IEP for a kid that comes into the middle school, but tries to understand it and asks a lot of questions. So we make sure that our department chair and our high school intervention specialists have the opportunity to collaborate with the building administrators just on any specifics that they might need to know. And then the one difference at the middle school and high school from elementary is we do schedule what we call collaboration days in the fall. So not only do our intervention specialists meet with classroom teachers prior to the school year starting to talk about the IEP, the accommodation, what needs the student has, making sure every teacher has a copy of the IEP, making sure they all have copies of accommodations and things that are necessary in the gen ed classroom, but also we spend a whole day where our intervention specialists are in the community room, and teachers who have our students come into the community room to meet with the individual intervention specialists to talk about IEPs, specific kids in their classrooms. We understand that it's very complicated when you get to high school, and our kids now, very similar to middle school, have 7 or 8 different teachers. And we've really made an effort to make sure that every single teacher that has a child with an IEP not only understands what's in the IEP, but what's necessary, but what accommodations are necessary, any materials that we need to have prepared for the student when the school year starts. Kudos to our high school team over the last couple of years who have really developed some good processes to make sure that kids' needs are being met. So I do rely heavily on Andrea and the department, but they are heavily involved in that transition process as well.
Okay. So basically, the bottom line is that we do have a thorough process in place, but what we really want to make sure that the ISs understand is that we trust them to know what their student needs so that they have a successful transition. if they need multiple visits, if they need a familiar staff person to help with the transition at the early part of school. And they always will have their IEP accommodations in place and that. So that's about it. We are open for questions.